All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. She just stepped out for a minute, but I did want to thank and acknowledge Debbie Higgins, who's back today from Cornerstone at Caregiving, who donated all the refreshments. So thank you to Debbie. Yeah. And today we have a fascinating topic. Really happy to introduce our friend Bob Ainsworth over here. Bob is the author of DUPED, which is about the Gardner Museum heist, and some other books as well, which he'll tell you about. And today he's going to talk about, did you see anyone seen $500 million in art lying around Boston? It's quite a mouthful.
That's how much it is?
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Hi. Oh, it's okay. Thanks very much. So somebody's going to kill the lights. There we go. Nice and romantic. If you can kill more. Yeah, he's going to kill the lights. There we go. There we go. So this is a pretty big crowd. The biggest one I've done to this date was in Chatham, and they had a much smaller room, and they were piling the people in. They were like jamming them in around the back, and there turned out to be about.
We need that just for the cable guy. He requested to see you. Does that work for you?
We'll see. So what's going to happen is some of the stuff here is kind of dark, so it's hard for people to see, but you judge it. I'll let you guys figure it out. That's technology. I have no idea what that is. Anyway, so yeah, that was the biggest one so far. So this is really pretty cool. So my name is Bob Ainsworth. That's my wife Pat over there. So I do the talking and the writing, and she does the selling and collecting the money, which seems appropriate. So I was an accountant in my life before I retired, and I was sort of trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I have a plate in my back, so I can only play golf once a week or so. So I can't do that. And I used to teach accounting, but they wanted me to teach in the summer, and that was like, forget that. So I'm not going to do that. And I thought I could do consulting, but I don't have a lot of marketing skills, so I didn't have a lot of contacts. So that was out. And I started just thinking about, well, maybe I could give speeches about frauds, because when I taught accounting, I would break up the class by telling them about some embezzlements that I discovered in my career and some other stories. But I didn't have enough content. It's not like I was an FBI white-collar crime guy or something. So I just that sort of fizzled out. But then I started thinking about, I always like to read. And I was a history and mystery guy. That's what I like. And when I was a kid, I read all the Perry Mason stories. Remember Earl Stanley Gardner, Raymond Burr? They're on TV now. They're really good. We're sort of hooked on seeing them again. But I used to read those when I was like 12 or 13. And I remember the librarian going to my dad. It's like, oh my God, your son is reading this like adult stuff. And if any of you know or have read those books, it's not like it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's pretty plain vanilla stuff. So my dad was like, no, let the kid read. And so I did. And I've always loved mysteries, Sherlock Holmes, David Baldacci, Leonard Elmore, Michael Connelly, just tons of really good writers. And so I started thinking about, well, maybe I could do that. But to do it, you have to have a couple of things. You have to have a character. And I worked for a company that put out the Dummies books. The yellow Dummies books. And I was the controller for that. I did the accounting for that. And the guy who owned our company was the most brilliant man I ever met. And I decided, I would make him my lead character, my Harry Bartlett, because he was just so smart. And that sort of led me to, well, the people who I surround him with are going to be people I admired. And the people who I thought were jerks would be my bad guys. But that gave me a lot, right? It gave me people and faces and why I liked them or didn't like them. So it sort of filled that in. And then, the other part was, to come up with a crime, but that's pretty easy, right? You can find crimes all over the place. but I needed places. So the first one I started is Cond, and that's set on Nantucket. So I was telling somebody here, we have a very rich friend, they have a 10,000 square foot house. So I set the thing at their house and all over Nantucket, and it opens with, any of you know Nantucket? Do you know the snapping turtle pond at the west end? So I have my character find his best friend in the snapping turtle pond getting like chewed up. So, well, it's not that gory, but that's what happens. Anyway, so that was the first one I did. So the second one I did was Duped, because I had a character in the first one called Uncle Louie, who's sort of a Sopranos type hitman guy. And one of my friends, somebody who reads my stuff, said, I love Uncle Louie, write a book just about him. So I had to come up with the biggest crime in Boston, which was pretty easy. It's the gardener. So that put me on this. And then after I wrote the book, he said, well, I've booked you for a presentation up in Gardner, Massachusetts, not at the Isabella, but the Gardner. And he said, you've got 6 weeks to put a presentation together, so, get your butt in gear. So I did, and that's what this became. So I've done like 30 or 40 of these now. They're a lot of fun. You guys don't know me from a hole in the wall, but you all have some knowledge of this. Somebody here has some knowledge about it. If any of you have contact with people who did it, I'm serious. No. I've had the FBI agent who was the first guy on the scene that day in my audience. And I've had people who their cousins are connected to one of the suspected thieves. So I'm deadly serious. If you think you know, or I've had people come forward with Whitey Bulger stories. So if you have stuff, I'd love to hear it, because, sometimes I work it into these things. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, your parents did it or something. Anyway, so what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you all to relax, and I'd like you to close your eyes. Now, in a crowd this side, there'll be more than a couple. But this part goes much better for you if you close your eyes and just visualize what I tell you. Okay? And if you don't, that's fine. You'll just keep staring at me. But that's fine. So I want you to picture that you're hovering over the city of Boston. It's March 18th, 1990. It's an hour past the end of St. Patrick's Day. Below you is a brown rectangle building with a skylight in the middle. In front of the building is the fens, the green area, the marshy area. Up to your left is Fenway Park and the Citgo sign at Kenmore Square. Up to your right is the Museum of Fine Arts at Northeastern University. If you look out past the fens, you see Sturrow Drive, the Charles River, and then Cambridge. To the left of that brown building is a road called Palace Road. It's a one-way street going towards the fens. It's not very well lit, sort of an amber color. To the side of that building is a little brown bump out with a side door. It's the entrance for the employees. About 100 feet past that entrance, there's a car sitting there, idling. 2 men are in it. Taller one is the driver, shorter one is the passenger. And they're sitting there, and it's just before 1 a.m. All of a sudden, from behind them, they hear people singing Irish songs, right? St. Patrick's Day songs. People have been out drinking, it's St. Patrick's Day. The guys tense up. There's 5 of them. They come stumbling down the road, and they fall on the street right near the car. One of the girls looks up. She sees the left shoulder of the driver. It's got a patch on it that says Boston Police Department. They're like, we got to get out of here. We're underage. We've been drinking. We better leave. So they take off over towards what's Simmons College. The two guys stay in the car. A minute or two later, that side door, the employee entrance, all of a sudden opens up. And the inner light flashes outside, and then the door is shut. Nobody comes in or out. The guys stay in their car. They wait another 15 or 20 minutes. Gets to be about 20 after 1. The driver puts the car in gear, slowly glides up opposite that entrance, and parks. The two men get out. They're in complete Boston police officer uniforms, down to the pointy hat and the gold down their pants, the side of their pants. They go up to the side door. Hey, let us in. We hear there's been a disturbance. They get buzzed in. Now they're in a little glass enclosed area. They flash their badges. They get let in again. Off to the right is a counter. Behind that is one of the security guards, sort of a hippie-looking kid in his 20s. They say to him, hey, come over here. We think we recognize you. He comes from around the counter. Where's your partner? So there's always two guards at night. He says, oh, he's out doing his rounds. Fine, can you call him? They give him his walkie-talkie. He calls the other partner down. The guy comes down. The two of them are there. The two cops grab the guys. We think there's a warrant out for your arrest. They slam them up against the wall. They take their wallets. They say, we know your name and your address. You better not rat us out. They duct tape them, handcuff them, walk them down to the basement. They don't miss a single step. They don't take a wrong turn. They know exactly where they're going. They take one of the guards to one end of the basement, handcuff him to some pipes, take the other one to the other end, do the same thing. This has taken 20 minutes. These guys are not in a rush. They know exactly what's going on. They're never going to get caught. They go back upstairs. They skip the first floor. They go to the second floor. They go to the Dutch room. They start taking the paintings off the walls. They're razor blading them out of the frames. They're breaking frames. One of them goes around the inner courtyard to a room called the short room, or the short gallery. And he starts fiddling, taking some things there. He makes one trip back to the Dutch room, but then he goes back to the short gallery, and then he ends up back at the Dutch room. They're at this for almost an hour. They bring all the stuff down to where they first came in, where the security guard station is. They put all their stuff there. They take a broken frame and they put it on the chair of the security director as a gotcha, saying, we've been here. They go back to the basement. They check on the two guys. They're still tied up. They come back upstairs. They take the camera's videotape that was showing everything that happened in the street and in the security guard area. They also take a piece of paper tape that showed all the movement in the Gardner while they were there. It takes them 2 trips to bring their stuff out to their car. In and out, in and out. It's about 2:40. They get in their car, go up Palace Road, disappear. Don't know if they went left or right, but they're gone. So now you can open your eyes. So it just helps to visualize what the story is. And I'll go through that in some more detail, but I want to tell you a little bit about Isabella herself, about the museum she created, the stuff that's stolen, who the guys were. We know who the guys were. That's pretty easy. We know who got them the police uniforms. That's pretty easy. After that, it gets a little bit dicey, but I'll take you through it. Let me get, hang on one second. So I have this little red dot, which works really well, except when it goes onto glass. So I'm going to be coming up here and pointing at things, so I'll get my steps in for the day. But I also need this to just advance everything. So this is how I start everything. So that's the Dutch room that I was telling you about after they were done. And you can see these were not people who were art lovers. They were clearly thieves. They were just trying to get stuff. This room right here where this red is, that's the tapestry room. They went in there for just a second and came out. They didn't touch anything there. You can see in this here where all the light is, that's the courtyard. And the corridor that they took to get to the short gallery is down around that way. So Isabella was very conscious of her image. So there aren't a lot of photos of her. There are more sketches and paintings. But this is a picture of her as a young girl. That's her engagement picture to Jack Gardner. So Isabella came from New York, wealthy family. Jack was he was a gardener. He was related to the Peabodys, you know, all that sort of money. So she came from money and married money. This is a picture of her with their son Jackie. Unfortunately, he passed pretty soon after he was born. She had one other pregnancy that ended in a miscarriage, and that sort of led to them taking on their traveling. So they went to China, they went all over Europe, and that's where they did all their collecting. Can you all see that? Okay. So that's a picture of her in 1888. So it's a little hard to see, but this is her on a ladder. She didn't just write a check and say, go build me a building. She was there telling them, put this here, put this there. If you go to the Gardner right now, everything is in exactly the same spot that she put it when she was alive. Nothing has been moved. So this is a picture of her in her spiritual phase. She was kind of an odd character. And this is a picture of her later in her life. So if any of you who've been to the Gardner, you've seen this painting, which this does it no justice. It's just a stunning painting, right, by John Singer Sargent. The red is bright red. The gold just pops. It's great to look at. So really, if you haven't been to the Gardner, you really should. That and that are two things done by a guy named Anders Zorn. I don't know why I'm getting feedback, but and you see this little headdress she has on? At the top of that headdress, those are diamonds. So when I say that she came from money, she came from money. Okay, you know, she collected all this art. She had enough money to put up her building. Okay, so this is a picture of her, a sketch of her. She borrowed a lion, Rex the lion, from the Franklin Park Zoo and walked him up Boylston Street. So when I say she was eccentric, she was a little eccentric. Okay? And you can see it says it's, you know, from the Boston Globe. But as a friend of hers said, so I'll get to the end. But so for her, remember, this is the 1880s. All of you women know women didn't get the right to vote till 1917 or 18. So she was sort of out there for her times. But she was drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, playing backgammon, driving her car fast. I mean, this was sort of out there stuff besides the lion. And as a friend of hers said, she's a millionaire bohemian, the eccentric, the leader of the smart set. She had a lot of artists and writers around her. It's okay. So this is just, you know, a history of her. You can read this faster than I can talk it. So when her father died, he left her. Hello. Okay, whatever. How's that? Great. So her dad died and left her $1.8 million, which is $78 million today. And then when her husband died, he left her $2.7 million, which is $102 million. So she had about $180 million to play with. So that's a lot of play money. But, you know, it was her vision for the museum, and Jack died, and she kept going. And so the museum opened in 2003, and she lived on the 4th floor. So if you go there now, there are 3 floors that you can see. The 4th floor is administrative offices and has thousands of pieces of art that you will never ever see, which I will tell you why in a little bit. And she died in 1924 and left $1.2 million to the museum. So this is where she and Jack lived on Beacon Street. So her dad built this side of it, and then Jack built the other side. So it's sort of down near the public garden, right off Beacon Street. Unfortunately, when they left here and she went to the museum, this building was bought by a member of the Draper family, you know, Draper Labs, and the new owner tore it down. So this is what's there now, but there is a little sign that says this is where Isabella lived. So just to familiarize, in case you don't, right? So here's the Gardner. There's that Palace Road I told you about. Here's the Museum of Fine Arts. You can see up there Fenway Park and Northeastern University. So here's another view, sort of a broader Boston view. So there's the Gardner. Right, that's Whitey territory. So my wife and I went to a family gathering for college graduation at Florian Hall in Dorchester this weekend. And so I was talking to a relative about this stuff, and he says, I have a Whitey Bulger story for you. I said, great, I love stories. So he takes me outside, and he said, pretend that building there isn't there. I said, okay, it's just, you know, a little field, some trees, a path. He said, you see down there in that little dark area? I said, yeah. He said, that's where Whitey buried 3 of his victims. And he said, look it up, and you'll see when after everybody confessed, they went in there and they found bodies. So it's just like, okay, that's a good Whitey story. So I'm going to ask you to remember 3 things. So the first one is that Palace Road, which is the side road. Okay, the second thing I want you to remember is a place called TRC Auto Electric. It's 1325 Dorchester Avenue in Dorchester. You don't need to remember that. Just remember TRC, and we'll get back to it. The third thing I want you to remember is the city of Revere, which is about 6 miles north. And Revere is no Walpole. Okay, right? You get what I mean. So the Gardner, just in case you don't know, is a 4-story building. It's got, you know, it's got the courtyard in the middle and the skylight overhead. Almost everything in there is things that she brought over, right? So if you're walking around there, it's not just the floor, you know, it's not like this floor, it's like a floor from a castle, or a ceiling from a monastery, or a fireplace from some other. She shipped tons of things back. Okay? And as a friend of hers said, if you ever inherited money that you could dispose of, you'd fill your house with beautiful objects. And that's exactly what she did. She had the money and she had the vision. So this is a place that they stayed at when they traveled in Venice, which is, you know, sort of a model for what she wanted to create. This is another building in Venice. And you see those arches? She took 8 of them out of that building and brought them back, and they are in the Gardner. So I'm not kidding when I said she shipped everything. So this is the inner courtyard. If you see straight ahead, that's where the Dutch gallery is. There, see the red chairs. This is the corridor that the guy came down, and on this side of that went to the short gallery. So this is what the Fenway looked like before she bought her land. It wasn't a great area. It was sort of swampy. It hadn't been developed. So this was sort of on the outskirts of Boston. But then she got through with it, and it looked like that. So, you know, she cleaned it up, and once she was there, then people started building after that. And then Boston expanded behind her. So this is just sort of a cutaway. So when I talked about the Dutch room, it's the 2nd floor there. There's the side entrance. The short gallery is the one over there in red. And there was one thing that I didn't tell you. There was an item stolen from the Blue Room, which was on the first floor. But if you remember, I never said anybody went on the first floor. But an item from there was stolen. We'll get to that. So this is a picture taken the day, the morning of the theft. And there's the side entrance. You can see it there. And that's what it looks like now. My wife and I went there a couple months ago, and I snapped a picture. So there's a bunch of big questions. Who did it? Where's the stuff? And those are all great questions, but you have to start with, why was it so vulnerable? Why were two guys dressed as cops able to talk their way in and steal these items that are worth $500 million or more? Unfortunately, it actually has to do with Isabella. So this is her will. And remember I said she left $1.2 million to the museum? There was a problem with that. They could only spend the income. So if you do some quick math, 10% of $1.2 million is $120,000. You can't run a museum on $120,000. It's just impossible. So they were short of money. And the people who were on the board of directors were not great fundraisers. If any of you are on a board of directors, you have 3 jobs. Write a check, get other people to write big checks, and go to board meetings. And if you do the first 2, nobody cares, because they want your check and they want your friends' checks. So the people who were on the board were not great at fundraising. So the place was short of money. There was plastic over paintings. There were rubber mats on the floor. There was no climate control. It was just not in great shape. There was something else, and I'll go through what all that says. It basically says, if you move anything in my museum, one piece, then you have to sell everything in the museum. You have to sell the building, and all the money goes to Harvard. So those couple of thousand pieces that are on the top floor that you'll never see, it's because of that. So the place was short of money, and they couldn't, even if they wanted to, sell it or loan stuff out and get paid for that. They couldn't do it. So she sort of, handcuffed them in what they could do. It's like I said, that camera where I said they took the video, there was no backup. You'd like to have a backup of a camera? Nope, none of that. The guards were old men and hippies, and I'm not exaggerating. And there were no auto alarms. So normally if the guards, they'll go to a spot and here, go to the next spot here. And if they don't do their rounds, alarms go off everywhere. They didn't have that system. So as soon as those fake cops had the guards handcuffed and in the basement, they could have stayed there till 6 a.m. because nobody was going to come around until the next shift started at 7. So they knew they weren't going to get caught. So what was taken? So there's this little thing by a guy named Vermeer. There's only 33, I think, in the world. And when I looked it up, that's worth $250 million. Okay? There's this, which is a seascape by Rembrandt. I looked that up. That's $100 million. But these are just like fake numbers, right? Just start with a number, add a bunch of zeros, keep adding zeros, and that's what you get to. That's what this stuff is worth. There's this, which is what I stole for the cover of my book, because nobody's going to put me in jail, so I didn't care. That's a Rembrandt. That's, for some reason, only worth $10 million, but maybe I got it wrong. But, it's a Rembrandt, right? There's this, which is Chez Tortoni by Manet. I couldn't find a value for that. I didn't know why, but I'm sure that's worth a lot. There's this, which is Landscape with Obelisk by a guy named Flink. He was a student of Rembrandt's. Most of the time they thought this was a Rembrandt. It isn't, but still it's worth quite a bit. And then there's this, which is a 2x2 sketch by Rembrandt, 2x2. And I looked that up, and I swear I found $250 million for this little stamp size thing. Right? So this is stuff that is just incredibly valuable. So this is the room after they put the paintings back, right? The frames back. So That's where Lady and Gentleman in Black was. That's where Storm of the Sea of Galilee was. This one's a little hard to see, but you see that white dot there? There was a vase there. It's called a goo or a coup. It's just a little vase. They stole that. So sort of an odd choice. The Vermeer was there, and that one by Flink was on the back side, so they were sort of back to back. They did not take that Rembrandt, but they took the little one that was there, and that's the corridor down to the short gallery. And that's the flank. You can see it as a backside, and there's the corridor down there. So this is the short gallery. It's not much bigger than a walk-in closet. Okay? And what they took was, this is a flag from Napoleon. It was on a staff, and on top of the staff was an eagle called a finial. And they tried to take the flag but couldn't, so just took the eagle off the top, sort of like, you know, on the American flag there. They took that. And then they took 5 sketches by Degas, and they weren't from like the first door, the second, third, fourth. They went way back in here and took sketches. Again, interesting choice when other stuff was around. So here's the finial. You know, like I said, sort of a normal thing on top of a flag from Napoleon's First Regiment. This is the only item of the 13 stolen items that has ever been seen. No, it's not for me. And the reason we know it was seen was 2 years ago, a jeweler from Washington Street came forward. And he said a couple of months after the theft, a guy walked into his place and unwrapped a burlap piece, and the eagle was there. And he said to the guy, "Do you want to buy the eagle?" To which the jeweler said, "Why didn't you just steal the Mona Lisa? It would be just as easy to sell because you just stole this finial that's in all the papers." So the guy wrapped up the eagle and disappeared with it, and that's the only item of the 13 that's ever been seen. The guy who had that eagle was a guy named Bobby Donati, who we will get to. So these are the Degas sketches. And, you know, I'm not knocking Degas, but these aren't Rembrandts, they're not Vermeers, they're just sort of watercolor sketches. 3 of them are of jockeys and horses. Nice, I'm sure, but really? This is what you took? But that's what they took. So this is what she paid for everything. I'll leave this up there for a minute, just because it's sort of interesting. So that little Rembrandt, she paid 120 bucks for. The Vermeer, 5,600. That eagle, she paid 300 bucks. The vase, she paid a lot for. You know, because at the time, you know, 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s, something from China was worth a lot, so she paid a lot for it. So it's just different things are valued at different times. But, you know, at the end of the day, the 13 items are worth, like I said, just start with a number and keep adding zeros till your hand gets tired. Okay? So I introduced myself as an accountant, so I sort of like detail stuff. So I found these things. So this is her receipt for getting that Chez Tortoni by Manet. This is the receipt for shipping the Degas. See, it says Degas there. This is an inventory of stuff she had. So there's a Rubens and there's a Rembrandt. This is her purchase for 120 bucks of the Rembrandt. They called it Trois Mustaches because it looks like he has 3 mustaches, but that's the one for 120 bucks. This is, buying the concert by Vermeer. It's right there. This is buying the flag, Napoleon's flag, not the finial, but the flag. This is a Rembrandt. See, it says Rembrandt there. And this is her personal check for half of that goo or coup. So I just thought it was interesting that she used State Street Bank, you know, being an accountant, you know, it's like money and stuff and whatever. So why were those things taken? So I did this presentation, like I said, down in Bourne. And I got through this whole part, and a woman is right back there, and she stands up and she says, "You're wrong. I'm like, fine, I'm just a guy. I've researched stuff. I could be wrong. People tell me stuff. So afterwards, I went up to her and I said, so why do you think I'm wrong? And she said, well, my husband was a hitman for the mafia. Which he was, because she gave me her name and I looked him up. And she said the stuff was on order. And as soon as it was stolen, it was shipped overseas. That's her story. Now I have a Whitey Bulger story. So I was in the hospital a bunch of years ago, and I had a roommate, and we're talking, and he's like, so what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm writing this book on the Gardner theft. And he starts laughing at me. I'm like, John, why are you laughing at me? He says, well, if I tell you, I'll have to kill you. He didn't mean it. He was a nice guy. But anyway, so for 3 days, I keep bugging him. Why are you laughing? He won't tell me. Finally, I'm getting kicked out. I go around the curtain. I sit on his bed there. And I'm like, okay, John, why are you laughing? He said, well, he was a Korean War vet, worked his way up from being a bouncer to owning a restaurant. And he said he owned a restaurant with Whitey Bulger. Not like a hangout for Flemian weeks, but a nice restaurant. And he looked at me in the eye and he said, I'm telling you, Whitey did it. So you have to sort of think about this like the Kennedy assassination, right? There were never any trials for the Kennedy assassination for obvious reasons. So evidence wasn't presented. There were never any trials. Nobody was arrested for this. Evidence has never been presented. So there's tons of theories. I've had people tell me the stuff's in Kentucky or it's in Melrose or it's just, it could be any place. Who knows, right? But you sort of have to have an open mind. However, I like this theory of why the stuff was taken because it's very simple. So this is the 1984 guidebook for the Gardner. And remember I said stuff doesn't move in the Gardner, stays where it is. So this is the Dutch room description. Look at the items there that are pictured for the Dutch room. And remember the items that I said were stolen. The vase and the Storm of the Sea of Galilee. Look at what else they describe. The obelisk by Flink. So the stuff that's described in the guidebook is the stuff that was stolen, but it gets better. Those 5 Degas sketches, if you go to the description of the short gallery, guess which 5 are written up? So to my simple brain, somebody said, and these guys were not, genius IQ guys. They ripped a page out of the guidebook and said, here, you steal this stuff, and you steal this stuff, and then we'll meet downstairs, and then we'll figure out how we're going to sell it. I don't think it was anything harder than that. I could be 100% wrong, but I like this theory. This is the Chez Tortoni. Remember I said this is the item that was taken from the first floor in the blue room. That's where it should be, right? That's the frame without it. Guess which is the only item for the blue room described in the guidebook? That. It's just like too much of a coincidence, and I really like it, and it's simple. So anybody could prove me wrong, but I kind of like it. So what else was there that was not taken? Well, there's that self-portrait that was in the Dutch room, right? They could have taken that. I think it was screwed to the wall. They had trouble getting at it. There's this, which is a Rubens, okay? There's this by Titian. The 4 of those were put together at the Gardner, and they're worth $1 billion together. They were done by the King of Spain, 1500s, whatever. Just incredible value. They didn't take that stuff. Now, this thing was big, and it was on the 3rd floor, and maybe the guys were lazy. They also had a very small car, so maybe that was it. Who knows? All right, so there were other attempts to get into the Gardner, and there were other attempts to get into the Museum of Fine Arts before the theft. So I will go through those other attempts with you. So a decade before the theft, the FBI had an undercover guy trying to find stolen art. And he was told somebody was going to break into the Gardner. So they went to the Gardner and had a meeting and said, look, this is what's going to happen. The first time I did this presentation, the head of security at the Gardner was at my meeting. He was at this meeting, but he was at mine, and he told me about this. I mean, I knew about it ahead of, but he told me about this. So, like I said, I get very interesting people who show up at these things. Anyway, so they planned to break in. They did some stuff. Nothing, nobody ever tried, but it was definitely planned at least a decade before it happened. 2 months before the theft, over at the Museum of Fine Arts, two guys go up to the back of the MFA, the side near the fins, not where the statue is. And they knock on the back door. Hey, let us in. We hear there's been a disturbance. The guard says, I can't let you in. I have to go find my boss. So he goes running around the MFA, which, as you know, is gigantic and takes like 8 years to find everybody. By the time he gets back, the two guys are gone, but they tried to get in and they had Boston police uniforms on. The MFA didn't tell anybody about this. They didn't tell the cops. They didn't tell the gardener. They didn't tell anybody. They kept it a secret. I know. Nice of them to share. 2 weeks before the theft, that side door at the gardener, two guys are beating up another guy. He breaks free. He goes to the side entrance. Hey, let me in, I'm getting beat up. The guard says, I can't let you in. He walks away from the side entrance, hops in a car with the two guys who are beating him up, and the three of them drive away together. So maybe another attempt to sort of get into the gardener. That was 2 weeks before. The night before the theft, right? So the theft was on the 18th. On the 17th, at least 3, if not 4 people were actually let into the gardener. And we know this because we have the tape, right? The fake cops took the 18th tape. They didn't take the 17th tape. If you want to watch this thing, if you want to take a picture of that, you can go on to FBI.gov. But I will warn you, it's very dark, it's hard to see. You have to turn off all the lights, your eyeballs have to get gigantic, and you have to watch it a lot. But it's interesting. So let me know when you're done. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that, but then I have some screenshots too. All done? That's fine. If you just go to FBI.gov, there you go. Okay. So. That's the car coming down Palace Road the night before the theft. It parks opposite the side entrance. There's the old security guard. There's the car parked. You're going to see a guy walk to the side here. Right? The light goes on. The old cop is standing there. Sorry about that noise. I don't know where it comes from. Like I said, this takes patience. Now I'm just going to let you see a little bit of it. But there, you see the light goes on in the car? Now you're going to see the guy walk. There you see him walking. And the old guard is gone, and the hippie guard is here behind, and he lets him in. Okay, there he is. There's the hippie. The guy goes in the side entrance. Then he goes back out. Right? See, there's hitting the button. There's the guy. See him coming out? There he is, and the light's going to go on in the car because he turns the car on. Hey there. Now the side door opens up. Somebody else goes in. The guy's in the car, but somebody else goes in the thing. Right? See the light there. See, he's letting somebody else in. It's buzzing from the video. All right, so hang on. So I'll fast forward this. Hang on. There's another guy going in at 5300. I fast forward it because nothing happens. So that's 3 people going into the gardener. And then there's somebody as he's going in, somebody else just came out, right? And then the car is going to drive away. So you sort of lose count. It's like 3 or 4 people were let into the Gardner the night before. No reason. All right, I'm going to kill this now. Okay. So these are screenshots I took because I know that was fast and it's hard to see and if it's not dark. But there's the old guy, right? I can't find his name. He was not on duty the night of the theft. He called in sick, never had anything to do with anything. You know, he was just a guard. There's the hippie. His name is Rick Abath. He passed away about 2 months ago. They thought he had something to do with it, but he passed lie detector tests. He never had great wealth. They never pinned anything on him. They never arrested him. Okay? So here's the car backing into Palace Road. There's the old guy disappearing. There's the guy going into the side entrance. There's him being buzzed in. There's somebody else going in right there. There's the guy going back to his car, starts the car. Right, somebody else goes in there, so that's like 3. Yeah, no, it's crazy. There's the guy who was let in. We don't see his face very good. They can't identify him. Okay? Then there was nothing for a long time, I'm just telling you. But then see, somebody else is down there at the corner. Right? There's somebody else 8 seconds later walking in. So is this guy that guy? Probably. And at 53:10, somebody's coming out. Oh, I misspelled station. 53:24, the car's sitting. 53:30, the car drives away. And then that's it. So that's the Reader's Digest version of this whole thing. I think it's really cool to watch it because you see this stuff. But they have the tape. August 10th, 2015, an attorney, George G. Burke, says he knows who that last guy is who was let in. And a client of his knows that guy. And he said that guy who was in there was the one who planned the whole thing. But his client will not come forward because he is afraid of getting killed. So until the guy who did it dies, he's not going to say who the guy was. Now, he did tell the U.S. attorney. Nobody's ever been arrested. So hard to know, but somebody out there knows. And so Mr. X, who knows the guy, and the guy who went in were both in the antiques business with these 2 guys, Connor and Youngworth, who we will get to. So they have a connection through this whole thing. March 18th, I told you about the partiers coming down the street. The car they were driving was a 1988 red Dodge Daytona hatchback. It's not like they had a gray Toyota, of which there's 8 billion in the world. They had a red Dodge Daytona hatchback. Idiots. I told you about the security guards. Okay, and I'll go through the theft and the discovery the next morning. Yeah. Oh, over here I'm getting feedback? So this way I'm not? Okay. So the revelers saw the hatchback and they saw the cops inside. I read where, so these are the statements. So 2 of the people were Justin Stratman and Nancy Clougherty. And she says she got a look at the driver and the sketch that she was shown looks nothing like the guy that she saw. Don't know why. She disputes that they think they know who did it. They all went to the cops. They talked to the cops. The cops said, hey, you're a bunch of drunk college kids. You didn't see much. You saw the car. Other than that, thanks very much for playing. Go on with your lives. And they did. So that's what an 88 red Dodge Daytona hatchback looks like. Okay? It's the same. So this is the car from the video the night before. So the same car was used on the 17th and on the 18th. And that's what it looked like. Not an unobtrusive car. So this is the hippie security guard. So that's Rick Abath. He had a band called Uriah, and they lived in Alston, Brighton, and they would throw parties there. And for $5, you know, you got all the beer and weed you wanted, and you got to listen to music. And that's where they hung out. The other guard that night of the theft was a guy named Randy Hested. He was a replacement, called in at the last minute, had nothing to do with anything, and was cleared and was just wrong guy, wrong time. So, you know, I had you visualize this, but I'll just sort of run through it, you know, the minute by minute of what's going on. And we know this because we have that tape, remember? The only thing the fake cops didn't know of, there were 2 copies of that tape. So we know this because there was a second printout of all the movement in the Gardner. And I'll show you that tape in a minute. But for 15 minutes, there was no movement in the Gardner, nothing detected. They have no idea why. And then it started up again, and then it stopped again. Don't know what happened. Then they get to 2:40 to 2:45. They check on the guys downstairs. They come up. They go in and out to their car. And Gone Baby Gone, which is a really good book and movie. Ben Affleck directed his brother Casey. Really good movie. I like that movie. It's been on a lot lately, but I like watching it. So this is a copy of the tape. And you can see what it says, right? Someone is in the Dutch room, investigate immediately. Yeah, no kidding, you're getting robbed, but there's nobody to see it, right? It's not going anywhere but in the security area. So it did no good at all. So this, I found this about a month ago. This is an interview with the security guard, the hippie, Rick Abath. So let me play this for you for a second.
Come in, clock in, there would be 2 guards.
Rick Abath was one of the night watchmen on duty
this was
the
on
night of the
CNN.
crime. Until now, he'd never done a television interview about what happened that night.
Cops rang the doorbell. They said, Boston police, we got a report of a disturbance on the premises. So I buzzed them in.
That decision to buzz them in is something Rick Abath has had to live with for the past 23 years.
The cop that was dealing with me turned to me and said, don't I know you? Don't I recognize you? I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Can you step out from behind the desk?
Here, Rick makes another grave mistake. He steps away from the security desk and away from the panic button. His only way to contact the outside world. His only way to prevent what was about to happen. In a matter of minutes, the 2 thieves had both night watchmen completely under their control.
He finished cuffing me and he cuffed my partner and very dramatically said, gentlemen, this is a robbery.
The thieves lead Rick and his partner down to the basement to different areas. Rick is taken to the boiler room and cuffed to an electrical box. His eyes and mouth were duct taped, and he feared for his life. It all happened so fast, he never had a chance to hit the one panic button by the guard desk. He knew no one was coming to help. Did the thieves know that as well? It appears they did, since they were in no rush to get out.
Path is interesting. They took the guards after they handcuffed them and taped them and brought them into the basement. About 24 minutes elapsed, though, before we see them again.
Motion detectors placed throughout the building picked up their trail for nearly an hour and a half. But that didn't matter. Those...
Come in.
So anyway, so that was on CNN. If you go on CNN AC 360, which is Anderson Cooper 360, you can see the whole thing. And it goes on for another 5 or 10 minutes. But it's just interesting hearing the guy. actually talk. So this is a cutaway of the gardener and the theft. So you can see they come in the bottom, go down the basement, come up there. There's the Dutch room, back and forth to the short gallery over there, then back down to the basement, then up. Here's that blue room that nobody went in, but something was stolen from. Okay, and here's the gaps in the timeline down in the tape down below. So the only one who went into that blue room the night of the theft was Rick Abath. He swears he took nothing. But he went in at 12:27. He went in at 12:53. Remember I said the side door got opened at 1 o'clock, and he's the one who did that. He said he was checking the alarm. Ridiculous. But anyway, that was him. So the next morning at 7 o'clock, the next shift comes on. They see the broken frame on the security director's chair. It's like, oh my God, have they been robbed? Are the thieves still there? Are the guards dead? Or what's going on? So they went all around and they found him down the basement, and that's what he looked like. Yes, that is a knife behind him, but that wasn't left there. That was left after they discovered him. So what do we know about the thieves? We know from the videotape people going in and out. We know that the kids saw the fake somebody going around in a red Dodge Daytona, and we know the timeline, and we have sketches, and we have descriptions. So those are the sketches of the two guys. So you can see one with glasses and mustache, no mustache, and then the other one, mustache, no mustache. And we have descriptions, which are a little bit vary a little bit, but these guys were scared. They're not going to remember the same thing. Eyewitness accounts are always hard to go by. So you can see there are differences that I've highlighted there. So who done it? Was it an inside job? Was it Abath? They tried to find everything on him inside out. Nothing ever found. Personally, I would have lost the hairstyle when I was older, but that's sort of his choice. Was it freelance art thieves? Was it like Pierce Brosnan in the Thomas Crown affair? Was it the Pink Panther? Or who was it? It could have been anybody, right? Could it have been the mafia? Well, which ones? The Patriarchas from Rhode Island, the Angulos from North End, Whitey Bulger from Southie, Charles Murray from Charlestown. There's tons of choices, right? Or could it just been a couple of idiots, a couple of street guys who went in and did it? They're all possible. So here's Abath. Like I said, no sign of wealth. That's where he was discovered. Passed tons of lie detector tests. Never arrested.
Was he the one that was there on the 17th that let people in?
Yes. Yeah, he did both times.
Did he get fined or continue to work?
I don't know. I do know the night after the theft, he went to a Grateful Dead concert in Hartford, Connecticut. I don't think he did it. If you're not going to steal and then go to the Dead concert, but whatever. There was this guy named Brian McDevitt who was a known thief and who lived on Beacon Hill the day of the theft. But neither of the guards said that the guy had a beard. They would have noticed that, right? He told his girlfriend that he was paid $300,000 to rob the gardener. And then he left her. I think he was just trying to break up with her, frankly, because he went to Hollywood and tried to pitch a script about the gardener theft, and nobody would buy it. So then he just disappeared. So that was the end of Brian McDevitt. There's this guy who's sort of famous. He comes from Milton, real smart guy. His dad was chief of police. A guy named Miles Connor. He had a rock band, the Wild One, who were mildly famous at the time. And he stole paintings, right? This is what he looked like later in life. He cased the gardener with that guy Donati in 1974, 17 years before the theft. They had figured out how to break in. But he was in jail the day of the theft. So he didn't do it, but he sure enough knew enough how to get in there. So then there's this guy named William Youngworth who was friends with Connor. He stole from Miles Connor. He was in jail the day of the theft, but he also knew how to do it. He owned this place called Almost Antiques with his antique store. Personally, I like the little Liberace down in the corner there. Sort of like dogs playing poker, right? He showed a reporter what he said was one of the stolen items. And the reporter scraped some oil off the bottom of the painting, and they tested the oil, and it was the right time period, but not the right painting. So he tried to get the $5 million reward, but didn't get it. He was friends with a guy named Joseph Murray, who we will get to. There's this guy, David Houghton. He dated Miles Connor's sister. All these people are interconnected. He visited Connor in jail and said, if I want to rob the Gardner, how would I do it? And Connor told him. Okay? But he weighed 350 pounds, and those guards weren't that scared. They would have noticed 350 pounds, so he didn't do it. He passed away a year or so after the theft. Then there's this guy, Lewis Royce. He was the guy in 1981 who the FBI guy said was going to try and break in. That was the guy who was going to try and do it. And he knew about the Gardner because he slept there as a kid. When he was 13 or 14, he learned that the man he thought was his father was not. And he ran away from home, and he was a street kid after that. And he would go in the Gardner, sneak up to the 4th floor, go under a table, sleep there, in the morning reverse his process, go about his day, and then come back. So he knew the Gardner inside out because he slept there. Okay? He stole other stuff. He owned a trading place just like they all did. He robbed a house with some guys for paintings. He passed away in 2020. They thought he was a suspect, but never knew anything more about that. So it could have just been a couple of guys, right? These are the sketches. How's that? Look pretty close? How about that one? Pretty good? That's George Reisfelder. He's one of the guys. He's the taller guy. That's Lenny the Mutt DiMuzio. He's the shorter guy. Those are the two. They're the two who did the theft. Like 99.9%. They're the two who did it. But, now just wait. So here's George being let off to jail at some other time, which he's happy about. There's another picture of him. Guess what car he owned? They used his car. He worked at TRC Auto Electric. Remember I said, he worked there. His sister-in-law said that Shea Tortoni was on his bedroom wall. He died of a coke overdose a year after the theft in Quincy. His body was found by a guy named Carmelo Merlino. We will meet Carmelo. Here's Lenny the Mutt. Guess where he worked? So there's two. He disappeared a year after the theft, and they didn't find his body for a couple of months because it was in the trunk of a car in East Boston. But then, he was dead too. So the two guys who went in are dead within a year. He was killed by a guy named David Turner, allegedly. And David Turner worked at TRC Auto Electric. So that's 3 so far. Here's Carmelo Merlino. Handsome guy, I think. He was a Patriarcha underboss. He owned TRC Auto Electric, and he ran a cocaine ring for the Patriarchas. So the guy who ran a cocaine ring found the body of a guy who died of a coke overdose. He was convicted of robbing an armored car. He exchanged a painting for jail time, not one of the 13, but other stuff. And he was caught on camera talking about the theft in 97 and 98, but just talking about it. They never found anything on him. And he passed away in 05. So here's TRC Auto Electric. Actually, when I went to that Florian Hall thing, my wife and I drove past this just for giggles. It's still there. You can get your car fixed there. I don't think if you're looking for cocaine, I don't think they have it anymore. But that's what it looks like. So this is everybody who worked at TRC Auto Electric. George, Lenny, Bobby Donati, right? The guy with the eagle, David Turner, David Houghton, the big heavy guy, Tony Romano, he wore the wire. and Carmelo Merlino. So 7 people, all connected with this little car place, all connected to the theft. So you got to think about this in terms of layers. So the 2 guys who went in were George and Lenny. Somebody got them the police uniforms. I'll tell you who that is. But then somebody else planned it above them and maybe distributed the stuff, right? So maybe it was a Whitey job, right? It could have been. Except this isn't what Whitey liked to do, right? He stole $1 million lottery ticket from somebody. He went in and took over somebody's liquor store. He liked to kill people. He mostly made his money by getting 15% of all the crime that was committed in South Boston. That was his source of income. So doing this sort of thing is really not his deal. And we know this because Fleming and Weeks said he told them, find who did the robbery so I can get my 15% from the guys who did it, right? So it really wasn't White. It's hard to believe it was Whitey did this. This was not his kind of thing. Any of you remember the Valhalla? What was the Valhalla? Anybody? Yeah. Running guns for the IRA. So Whitey and that guy Charles Murray put guns on this boat, shipped it across the Atlantic. When it got there, there was a double agent who took the guns, gave them to the British Army. The boat comes all the way back and everybody gets arrested. So one theory is Whitey did this to get the paintings to give to the IRA so they could sell the paintings so they could get guns, and it's way too complicated. So like I said, this is like the Kennedy assassination. There's just a zillion theories out there. So here's Bobby Donati. He worked for this guy, Vinnie Ferrara, who was a really high up mafia guy. He stole paintings. He worked with Connor. Donati worked at TRC Auto Electric. The guy was Vinnie the Animal Ferrara, and he had that name for a reason. He's the guy who had the finial, right? Went to the jeweler. He possessed 2 Boston police officer uniforms. And we know this because the night of the theft, he was showing them off. The night before the theft, he was showing them off in a bar in Revere. Remember I said, remember Revere? He hung out in Revere, and he's showing off these uniforms that he's got. This is his house in Everett. They tore his house apart to see if the stuff was there. It was not. Unfortunately, so not that his death is funny, but this thing over where I'm going to highlight it, at this point we have no suspects and no witnesses. Unfortunately, in this kind of case, not many witnesses come forward. Yeah, no kidding, you're going to get killed. So just as a little side story, one of my friends who's Italian grew up in Revere, and he reads my stuff. And when he was reading it, he said, I have a cousin who's in the mafia in Revere. Do you want to meet him? I was just like, absolutely, I want to meet him. He was just like a bookmaker type, like he wasn't a... So I spent an afternoon with his cousin, and it was great. He told me tons of stories. I put them in the book. But I gave this speech a couple months ago in Revere, which my family thought I was going to get killed. But my friend said his cousins would be there to protect me. So clearly I came out alive because his cousins were there to protect me. So, like I said, think in terms of layers. So the 2 guys who went in, George and Lenny. The guy with the uniforms, Bobby. The next layer up are these guys. A guy named Bobby Garrenti. He hung out at TRC Auto Electric. He was a father figure to David Turner, who killed Lenny. His widow said he had some of the paintings, and he gave them to another guy named Bobby Gentile, who we'll meet. And a mobster said that he buried the stuff under his house in Orlando, Florida. Okay? But he died in 2004. He was friends with this guy, Bobby Luisi, who was a Philadelphia mobster. No, like I said, it's all connected. So the guy who he gave the paintings to was this guy named Bobby Gentile. The other thing that happened when I did my first presentation, I was in Gardner, Mass. Somebody had called right after the theft, or no, 10 years after the theft. Somebody had called the Gardner, Mass Museum instead of Isabella Museum. And they said, my neighbor across the street has the 13 items. Tell the FBI. So the director of the Gardner, Mass Museum called the FBI. They came screaming out. They took the tape, listened to the tape, and the next day, they're tearing his house apart. And under that shed, it was in Manchester, Connecticut, under the shed, they found a false floor with an article about the theft and a list of the 13 items and what you could sell them for on the street. They didn't find the stuff, but they found that. He passed away just recently. He's one, because this thing happened in 1990, right? So a lot of the people just aren't around anymore. So this last character is a guy named Irish Jim Marks. So he bragged that he had 2 of the Gardner paintings. He was friends with Bobby Guarenti. They're up in Maine at Guarenti's house. Guarenti says, let's go down to Revere and see a movie. So they drive down from Maine, the 2 of them, 2 different cars. They go to Jimmy Marks' house. They park in front. Here's his house. See that little light there? The light bulb is unscrewed. And while he is fiddling with his keys, Guarenti shoots him in the back with shotgun blasts and kills him. And we know this because Guarenti's wife said her husband did it. Like he was dead, she was just telling stories. But still, anything connected with this, you just didn't live very long. So where's the stuff? Sort of winding up. So it could be in Revere with Bobby Donati, right? Maybe there'll be a This Old House episode and a wall will come down and the stuff will be there. I don't think so. Maybe it's on Antiques Roadshow, but you never know. But it could be in Revere, because Donati had at least the Eagle. It could be up in Maine with Guarenti, because that's where he was. Maybe it's in some other place in Connecticut with Gentile. Or it could be with that guy Luisi in Philadelphia. Or it could be in Orlando, Florida, where Guarenti put it under his house. But they jackhammered the house and didn't find anything. Okay? So they've looked in a lot of places. So this is what the FBI thinks. So the middle paragraph, we have identified the thieves, criminal organization based in that's TRC Auto Electric. And then the top says we think the stuff went to Connecticut and Philadelphia, taken to Philadelphia, offered for sale, but we don't know where it is. So that's the last that yes, ma'am.
Wasn't somebody brought to court and then found not guilty?
Not that I know of, but if you do, you can tell me after I talk. It could be perfectly sure. But that's the last thing I've seen from the FBI of what they think's happened. So, my basic theory, Donati got the 2 guys, gave them the uniforms, they got the stuff, they got killed, right? They gave it to Donati in Revere, then he gave it to the other guys, and then it went to Philadelphia. That sounds like a pretty simple, timeline for the stuff. But I wrote a book and I needed an ending, right? So I write to amuse myself and my friends because it's not like I'm John Grisham or anything. So I stole the cover from one of the paintings. There's my Uncle Louie guy, right? And Uncle Louie is a real guy. He was the uncle of one of my wife's high school friends, and he was the scariest dude you ever want to be in a room with. Scarier than Whitey Bulger. Oh yeah, Uncle Louie. So in my ending, so my wife comes from Swampscott, and I used to, we've been together since for whenever, and I would drive up there, and I always went past this place called Doc Kagan's Auto Clinic. So when I had to come up with an ending, I said, and it's in Revere, so I'm like, I'm going to put the paintings there. So that's the address, Route 1A South Revere. And the thing that always amused me was there was a picture of Doc Kagan with the head mirror, like that he was a real doctor, and he held in this little crap place fixing cars. So I just thought that was hysterical. So I put the paintings in the oil changing pit down there, but I found a picture of Doc Kagan, and that's Doc. Like I said, you got to have some fun with this. Anywho, the end, if you really want to read stuff about this, Steve Kirchin, Boston Globe, Pulitzer Prize winner, uncovered the Catholic priest thing. He's made this his after retirement thing, and he wrote a book about it. Great book. Oh yeah, no, it's a very nice guy. Yep. This is a Robbery is on Netflix by Mike Barnacle's kids. Fantastic 4-part thing. Great stuff, right? So these are all the places I'm going to in the future. So there, you're first. If you want to see this again. I'm also doing presentations on the current book that I'm finishing on Charles Ponzi. I have my characters in 1920s Boston. So I have a presentation on those. Right, is there anything else I'm supposed to say?
Can you go back to the previous screen?
I can.
Talk about where to get your books.
Oh yeah, no, I'll get to that. Oh yeah, oh that thing? There you go. Yep.
How to get your books online with Kindle.
Oh, okay, I'll get to that. You done? Yes. Okay. So those are my presentations. And then after that, I'm in Vegas with Cher in residence for a while. So my other books are Conned, which is set on Nantucket, and there's wine scams and other stuff. It's a really fun book. That was the first one. The next one is about these women who are look-alike, and I call them doppelschwindlers. And they run Ponzi scams on people. That one's on the North Shore, because that's where my wife comes from. So I like that one. It took me forever to get their hair to line up. I do my own covers. I do everything myself. Here's the Ponzi book that's coming out by Labor Day. The next book, is going to be sports frauds and scams, baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. So I'm writing that one now. That'll come out next year. The one after that is about a small town that people go in and steal every bit of money from the whole town, including $500 million from a school. Okay, so that's a fun one because I worked out there. And the one after that, so this one's really cool. A friend of mine calls his father the last unindicted mayor of, I won't tell you the town, because everybody after his dad was indicted. So he told me that, and I said, that is the greatest title for a book or a movie. So I went home that night, I wrote 2 pages, and I came up with this cover at like 2 a.m. But that's not coming out till 2027. Yeah, I know, I have a lot to do.
Were you a teacher?
Yeah, I was. I taught accounting.
What did you teach?
Accounting. So my books are in hardcover, all on Amazon. Hardcover, paperback. See the Beatles, paperback writer, right? You know, like I said, I amuse myself. There are ebooks. They're ebooks, and they're also on Audible. So you can listen to them like on your phone or in your car radio or whatever. So if you go on Amazon, you can do that besides them being there. Is that good? Okay. Thank you. So the paperbacks are 15, the hardcovers are 20. If you buy 2, you get 20% off. And I'm on Facebook, and that's my PowerPoint, that's my website. And I'm done. Thank you very much.